What's going on, everybody? It's River from the Portland City Gym, here with a new series that I'm thinking of calling Memoir or Memento or something like that. Basically, I'm going to be reflecting on all the decks from past formats, probably from Black and White onward, probably like World Championship decks or like extremely popular decks or anything like that. Here we're going to be profiling a deck from probably one of my favorite seasons. Well, actually, 2017 season was pretty good, but the 2018 season was amazing. Zoroark GX and Double Close attackers ranked supreme, and it was a whole ton of fun to play in. For those who weren't playing at that time, that really stinks, dude. That really stinks. But yeah, here I'm going to be profiling toward Reklev's Zoroark Golisopod deck. Of course, you could probably just look up the deck profile on any other channel, because honestly, I feel like at that time, every single YouTube channel went and profiled this deck and played it, and, but I feel like I do just as good of a job as the millions of other people. That's an exaggeration, but maybe not, honestly. I mean, there are a lot of people on this platform. But, so like I said, we're going to be doing Zoroark GX Golisopod GX, and this deck is really cool. The reason I'm profiling this and not like a World Championship deck is because that I just really wanted to profile it. It's partly my channel, so I can partly do whatever I want. Or at least competitive-wise, I can do whatever I want on this channel. So, I profile what I want. And this probably was my favorite deck. Of course, I tried to be a special snowflake, and I tried to base this deck more around Golisopod. I played more like escape ropes, and just straight up just played more switching cards. But this deck still was better than mine. I shouldn't have tried to be a special snowflake. I should have played the same list like everybody else, and I regret it to this day. And I was immature back then, and now I realize why I should have liked this deck a lot more than I did. So Tord Reklev, easily one of my favorite players. He still plays, obviously. He got top 4 at the 2019 season Worlds, pretty sure, with Reshizard. But this deck, sadly, he did not win Worlds 2018, but sadly, but he got back-to-back international championship winnings with Trashalanch Garbodor first, with 4 copies of Tapu Lele, which has never been done. So yeah, and then he went and he already pretty much, I'm pretty sure at least, already had his Worlds invite, but just for the flex, I can't remember which, he won the London Internationals and North American. London isn't a country, but UK Internationals. He won the North American Internationals and the European Internationals, and back-to-back, and just because he could. Honestly, and that's a major flex. Major respect, dude. And this is one of the decks that he played. So, 4 copies of Zoroark GX, first off. 1 copy of stand-in Zoroark. 4 copies of Zorua. 2 copies of Golisopod, with 3 copies of Wimpod. 3 copies of Tapu Lele. 1 copy of Tapu Koko. 1 copy of Mr. Mime. And 1 copy of the Evolutions Mewtwo. Now, really neat Pokemon lineup. 4 copies of Zoroark GX. Of course, what part about this card isn't good? 210 HP for a Stage 1 isn't bad, especially compared to something like Whimsicott, which is kind of lackluster in HP compared to this. Has probably one of the most busted abilities in the game in Trade. Once during your turn before you attack, you may discard a card from your hand. If you do, draw 2 cards. Of course, we saw the same card in Cinccino from Sun and Moon. Here I go again, calling Sword and Shield base Sun and Moon base. I'm so done. I can't wait till Sword and Shield is just the norm. You know, then whatever's next, I'm gonna confuse it with Sword and Shield. But like, yeah, the same ability in Cinccino in the Sword and Shield base. It just wasn't as good at the time. Of course, it had that annoying mill deck, and nobody liked that. But other than that, really nothing too special. Definitely didn't see as much play as Zoroark did. And also had that amazing attack for double colorless. Does 20 damage for each of your Pokemon in play. So it is hitting a 120 damage. And that's pretty neat, if I do say so myself. And that was pretty much two-shotting everything in the game at the time. And for newer players, you're like, what? You mean there wasn't 280 HP Pokemon? No, there wasn't. So yeah, basically, since there were no annoying tag teams or VMAXs that completely broke the game with their extremely high HP, two-shot decks are almost never heard of anymore, sadly, because two-shot decks were extremely fun, like this one. So I did 120 damage, two-shotting everything in the format. Next we had stand-in Zoroark. Stand-in, amazing ability, just allows you to switch this card with your active Pokemon. And Mind Jack is, of course, an amazing attack, also for a double colorless, 10 damage and 30 more for each of your opponent's benched Pokemon. Probably the heaviest hitter in the entire deck, let's be honest here. So yeah, hitting 160 with a full bench, which you'd usually end up seeing in most matchups. So yeah. 4 copies of Zorua. This is not the Zorua he used the Zorua from Shining Legends. That one was nothing special. For Dark Energy, did 10. For DCE, did 20. You never used it anyway. Next up is 2 copies of Golisopod GX. Golisopod GX has a pretty good first attack. First impression does 30 damage for 1 grass energy, and if it became your active Pokemon this turn, then it did 90 more, so 120 for a single grass, and that was pretty good at the time. I mean, it can't get knocked off with enhanced hammers, you know, and if you wanted to discard it, you'd have to be going against an annoying mill deck. So, yeah, and even Wimpod itself isn't really that bad. It had an ability, and yes, I know that the printing on this is weird. I couldn't find any of my old copies of Wimpod, so I had to print them out, and this is what came out. I think my printer's running out of yellow ink. But it had a pretty good ability in Wimp Out. During your first turn, this Pokemon has no retreat cost, so if you're going first and you start as Wimpod, you don't have to get through that annoying 3 retreat cost. Next up is 3 copies of Tapu Lele. You really do need 3 in this deck. I can't see this deck without it, honestly. Just able to search out a supporter. Of course, just busted ability. Made it a $60 card. It rivaled Shaman. Just saying. I mean, like, I feel like that this card is a little bit more expensive than Shaman. But in the end, I feel like Shaman was a better card. Just saying. That's my personal opinion, though. Yeah, just Wonder Tag. Slap it on the bench and grab a supporter. Next up, we have a copy of Tapu Koko from the promo box. Of course, Tapu Koko just was able to put 20 damage everywhere for only a double colorless. If you weren't two-shotting things before, you're two-shotting them now. 20 damage everywhere, going to assure that you're always going to be two-shotting things, and always having a free retreater, at least one in a deck, is always nice. Next up, we have a copy of the Mewtwo from Evolutions. Mewtwo has a pretty decent attack also for a double colorless. Psychic does 20 damage, and 20 more for each energy attached to your opponent's active Pokemon. Things such as Espeon EX, Espeon GX, and Trashlanch Garbodor were pretty popular. So, you know, playing this is kind of a no-go. However, I just realized that this couldn't actually one-shot Trashlanch Garbodor, because that'd only be doing 80 with weakness. So, next up we had a copy of Bench Barrier Mr. Mime. Kind of self-explanatory. Just put up a barrier for your bench. It's pretty self-explanatory. Alright, that's it for the Pokemon lineup. Very, very neat indeed. Next up for supporters, we play 2 copies of Professor Sycamore. I could not find another Professor Sycamore. I found one, but I couldn't find any more. So I had to settle for Professor's Research. Sadly, Professor Sycamore is objectively better. 4 copies of N, 4 copies of Guzma, 3 copies of Acerola, 3 copies of Bridget, and 1 copy of Mallow. So, let's grow this a bit. 2 copies of Professor's Research, obviously, just there to discard your hand, draw 7. However, you don't really need any more than 2. Because of trade, you're already having a lot of discard and draw support. So you don't really need any more than 2, if that. 4 copies of N. You can find yourself behind in a game. Also, with a deck that draws as much as this one, you're going to want some shuffle draw. 4 copies of Guzma. Now, Guzma is interesting because I feel like when it first came out, people were kind of two-sided about it. It's like, great, it's Gust, and hey, if you need to switch, it can switch too. But for players like me, and I'm sure for a handful of other players as well, it left kind of an obstacle. It added another aspect of thinking to it. Because then you have to think, well, man, I want a Guzma, but how am I going to get such and such Pokemon out of the active? Again, Tapu Koko is good for that. But you're not always going to have Tapu Koko. It can be prized a lot, trust me. So this is where I really think that the idea for Golisopod really does shine, because this is far from the main attacker. But, that of course, that belongs to Zoroark GX. But I feel like this kind of added a bit of security. Like, I can use Guzma without any extra thinking. Just Guzma and switch into Golisopod and hit for 120. There's really no bad side effects to it. You know, why not? So, that, of course, that's my own interpretation of why 4 copies of Guzma with Golisopod is good. But, yeah. 3 copies of Acerola. It's, in a way, prize denial or knockout denial, but also just using Acerola so that you can switch into Golisopod for some extra damage. Also, you know, there's free retreaters in the deck, so you can just Acerola up your active, switch into Tapu Koko, and then go into a different attacker. All good. 3 copies of Bridget. 3 copies of Bridget is really good because you always need the ability to get your board set up. This is probably, if you were to be playing in a match, this is probably what your bench would look like after the first turn. I know it's kind of hard to see off frame because of all the cards. But a Zoro on your active, 2 Zoros on your bench, and a Wimpod. That was like your ideal turn 1. Oh, and maybe a double colorless somewhere on that board. That was pretty much your board every single time. Because there are 10 different ways to obtain the Bridget in this deck. You can, A, Ultra Ball, which we have 4 of, for Tapu Lele for Bridget. B, just have the Tapu Lele in your hand. We have 3 of them. And then C, just have the Bridget in your hand already. So we have 10 ways to get Bridget. And of course, that's a 1 in 6 chance to have Bridget in your hand already. And when you're drawing 7 cards, you have a little bit better than a 1 in 6 chance. So you are almost always going to be having Bridget on turn 1. Now, of course, that's not accounting for prizes or any of the such. That's base probability, but good probability nonetheless. So yeah, and plus, there's really no reason why not to play more Bridget, because if you get one later on in the game, just trade it out. I mean, just getting a bad card for good cards. No real reason why not to. And then Mallow. Mallow was good, of course, just so that you could search your deck for 2 cards, and then put them on top, and then use trade to grab them directly off the top. That's it for the supporters. Okay, next up is the item lineup. item lineup, of course, consisted of the standard 4 copies of Ultra Ball, 4 copies of Puzzles of Time, little less standard 4 copies of Field Blower, 2 copies of Choice Band, and 2 copies of Enhanced Hammer. So, standard. We play a very low count of energy in this deck, you'll come to find later on. And Puzzle of Time is also just really good to get any card back. And if you have to, you can play one and look at the top 3 cards of your deck and put them back in any order. That can be pretty good with trade, I've found. 4 copies of Field Blower, really important, because Garbotoxin was meta. And there's no exaggeration in that sentence. Garbotoxin was everywhere. So no matter what happened, you'd want to get rid of their tool immediately, and so that you can use your abilities. I mean, like, Zoroark using trade's pretty important. Stand-in's pretty important. I mean, I think Wimp Out can be pretty important sometimes. Well, actually, no, it can't, because you can't get Garbodor out in your first turn, but Tapu Lele's pretty important. Bench Barrier can sometimes be important. So, I feel like that's reason enough to play 4 copies of Field Blower. 2 copies of Choice Band. You're pretty much always 2-shotting things anyway. Choice Band, kinda not necessary in some matchups. However, there were things like Gardevoir GX that resisted Dark or some crazy stuff like that. So, Choice Band, of course, going to help you reach ultimate 2-shot potential. And then 2 copies of Enhanced Hammer, discarding Special Energy, double colorless energy, or as I like to call it, the double box, also known as Vespiquen, was really popular. So being able to discard Special Energy, especially in this format, is really good. Sadly, Enhanced Hammer is gone. Hopefully, it will be printed again, because you'll see on Saturday. But, yeah, I just really hope it will be reprinted soon. And, yep, that's the entire item lineup. And next up is, there are no stadiums in this deck, actually. And that's not really surprising. I mean, pretty much the best stadium at the time was Parallel City. And what were you going to do with Parallel City? Restrict your bench to 3? Or reduce your Golisopod's damage output? Pff, I don't think so. Next up is the energy count. 4 copies of double colorless energy and 3 copies of basic grass. Like I said, we don't play that many energy, so that's why Puzzle Time is so good in this deck. That's why you shouldn't really be too afraid to discard grass energy. Golisopod's not really the main attacker, and if you do need it, you have Puzzle of Time. If you don't have Puzzle of Time, well, then you're not going to have a fun time. But 4 copies of double colorless energy, of course, you're going to want to get those back. Why? There were no special charge in this deck. Don't ask me. Maybe Tor just wanted to get it directly back into your hand. That seems like a viable reason. Reason enough for me, at least. So, yeah. That's the entire deck. Of course, this is just a great deck. Really wish that we could have the old days of Pokemon back, and they're not even really that old of days. I mean, like the 2018, jeez. It's the 2018 format. 2018 format was really fun. Maybe I'll profile his other extremely popular deck in Garbo Dork. If you weren't playing then, you don't know why I call it Garbodork, but stick around for next week and maybe you'll learn why. Maybe. I don't know. I don't really feel like profiling it. I'll profile something else. Well, maybe I'll profile Mega Audino. Because I kind of feel like it. Okay. Well, I'll see you guys later. Bye.